check, check.
Hello.
Hi.
All right. Can you guys hear us? Yeah, they can hear.
Okay. Yeah.
The mics are on. We are so pleased to introduce Anna Cidre and Sherry List.
These are definitely two humans that you cannot resist.
We're so proud of what they've done so far.
We're super excited about their talk, Exploring WebVR.
Yeah. Thank you very much, Bonnie and Sam. We love you.
Yeah.
Okay. Thanks to you all to be here to explore the WebVR together. And we are going to start our journey by going to find out what the VR is and a little bit of history of it. And then we will move on to the WebVR. And from there, we are going to find out how to create a VR experience in an Angular project with the help of babylon.js. My name is Sherry List, and I have this very long title, which basically means that I'm a DevRel at Microsoft. Some of you might know me by my involvement in the Angular community with organizing different conferences and meetups. But I'm also the vice chairwoman of an organization, which I'm so proud of it, which is called Hack Your Future. Hack Your Future is a nonprofit organization which helps refugees and women from immigrant background to join the job market by going through an intensive course to be a front-end developers. And all of this happens with the help of a lot of volunteers that we have, that they are there as a mentor, which each of you can be a potential mentor in Hack Your Future. And Hack Your Future, I'm involved in the one in Copenhagen. But if you're from Belgium, there is a chapter here as well. And if you go around, there are different chapters in the country, or you can also start it on your own. And I'm here today with the one and only Anna Cidre.
So I'm Anna. Thank you all for coming. I'm the one of the organizers of ngSpain, and I'm also a Women Techmaker ambassador, which is a Google a Google program to empower women in tech. I'm also very involved in the community, as you can see. I'm the founder of GalsTech, which is also to empower women in tech in my local region in Spain. And if you want to discuss community, WebVR, web components, or whatever with me, you can find me later in the conference, or my DMs are always open on Twitter, so feel free. So let's get started. What is VR? I'm assuming that you all know that it stands for virtual reality, and you all kind of have an idea of what it is. But hopefully this will work, because we don't have sound. They're going to put it on in the back for us. Sheldon Cooper is actually going to help us figure out what WebVR is. So, hello.
It's nice to get back to nature. Why don't I do this more often? What a beautiful forest. Oh, hello, little butterfly. What's your name? Ow!
What you doing?
I was enjoying some virtual reality. You ruined it with your actual face.
What am I smelling?
Oh, it's car air freshener. I was simulating the smell of the forest.
Not what the forest smells like.
Well, how would I know?
Yeah, okay. So virtual reality allows us to actually immerse ourselves into a whole different reality, right? So how does this actually work? Let's take a look. Firstly, it has a lot to do with our own body. So our eyes don't actually see the same. Our left eye and our right eye don't see exactly the same image. What they do is they see a tiny bit off. If you take a look here, you see that tree is more to the border than the one on the left. So this is kind of a comparison to how our eyes actually see. And if we put one on top of the other, you get a better understanding of how this actually works. So just to make sure that your eyes are working properly, we're going to do a small exercise. You're going to have a look at this owl. You're going to put your hand over your left eye and then on your right. And you should see that the owl jumps a tiny bit. If you don't see that, I highly recommend that you go to an optician right now. So what VR does is it takes these two images, and then our brain does all of the work. Obviously, we have to consider distance and whatnot, but it's actually our brain that's doing all the work. But where does this whole VR come from, Sherry?
Yes, I have a question for you all. How old do you think that VR technology is? Is it a 10-year-old technology? How many of you think that is a 10-year-old technology? Okay. 30-year-old technology, is it that old? 50-year-old technology? I mean, actually, it's way older. It all goes back to 1833, where Sir Charles Wheatstone realized that, exactly as Anna explained, that our brain can perceive two different pictures, which is slightly offside, cannot preserve it as one object. And then by putting this this glass that it has, which is not so far from what we have today, that then it can create like a 3D image with that stereoscope. So it's pretty old, actually. And nothing much happened after that till World War II, that we had Link, who was an engineer, who created this flight simulator, and that it could, all the pilots, they could go through it and then have the experience of flying an airplane without doing that, and they could train around 500,000 pilots with that flight simulator. And then later on in 1962, there was a Sensoroma. Sensoroma, it was like an arcade, and just like Sheldon Cooper, they could add the smell to it as well, and then with that, people, they could have experience of more closer to the reality with the combination of all of these things together. But the problem was that Sensoroma was a pretty costly machine, and then there was not much of traction in that. Later on in 80s and 90s, a lot of more companies, they tried to create more of a headset, exactly like that, the stereoscope, and way closer to what we have today. But the problem with many of these headsets was that they were bulky, they were heavy, and then the image quality of that, it was not close to reality. Then later on in 2012, finally Facebook could create this headset, that Oculus one, which was not that heavy, and there was a big improvement in the quality of the image, and you could then call it you could call it the virtual reality. So after that, there was a lot of more companies that they came up with their own different headset. So you could see that this Oculus was the closest one to the one that we have today, and it has the actual feeling of the virtual reality. But I'm sensing that there are a lot of challenges with WebVR, actually with the VR. Can you tell me what it is?
Yeah, so there are a lot of challenges, as you can imagine, but there are three main ones. And the first one is visibility. So here we have internal factors such as the distance away from the eyes where we put the images. People might be able to see it closer or further away. But there are also a lot of external factors such as age or your eyesight and everything. And these factors we can't really influence. So this is a very difficult one to tackle. And next we have navigation. And again, it's divided in two. It could be menu navigation, how to get back to the menu. Yes, we have controllers, but sometimes we use that to go somewhere within the experience. And we also have navigation within the actual VR experience. So how do I get one step forward? There's teleportation, which works pretty well, but sometimes you go a bit too far or you don't go far enough. So it's still pretty clunky, and we need to work on that. And last but not least is a factor, again, that happens to a lot of people when using VR, is that they get motion sick, like going in a car or a train or a plane. And there's not really much we can do about it right now, but hopefully we'll be able to find a way to figure that out. But enough about VR. This is a WebVR talk, so let's talk about the web.
Yes. So WebVR, judging by the name, is an experience of having the VR on the web. And I told you that we have multiple type of devices, and then some of these devices, they can actually support the WebVR, which means that you can have your whole experience with the help of the browsers. And one of the good thing about it that some of them like the cardboard, that we also have it here, that you can just put your phone here, and it will use your browser, and then with this, then you can have the WebVR. So then it can make the headset so accessible and available for a lot of people. This costs around 15 euros, so it's pretty cheap. Whereas the other devices, they are very expensive. And so how does it work? How can we have it on the web? So there are two things. One is that once we want to have the VR, the first step is that to create a 3D world. And we can achieve that by using WebGL. So WebGL, for those of you that you are familiar with creating animation on the web, creating 3D on the web, you know that you can do it by WebGL. And then the other thing is that with the browsers, they have API. The browsers can give you, can tell you that the headset that you are using right now, what are the capability it has. If we go back to these headsets, you can see that some of them they have two controllers. Some of them they have one, and then cardboard has only a button. So then browser can tell you that what this headset currently can do for you. And the other one is that the positioning. Positioning is very important because once you have it here, you turn your head, you should be able to actually change the scene using your camera in the right angle, so the user can totally preserve that it's in the VR world. And you can achieve that by using those APIs. How it works in reality is that you have the browser that it can render. So it can render HTML and CSS. And the good thing is that we have one of these tags, which is a canvas. It can allow you to have your own renderer there as well. And then when you create your experience, with your 3D experience with the WebGL, then the canvas can help the browser to show that for you. And on top of that, you're using those API to enable the WebVR experience. So this is a big picture. But I'm pretty sure there are some challenges there.
Yeah, so we have the same ones as in VR, but can anyone tell me what challenges we might have with WebVR? Come on, it's the web.
Web?
Nobody?
Yes!
The browsers. So as you can see, we have a lot of red squares there. The good thing is that even though Edge tends to be a bit edgy, it supports it. And Firefox does too. Chrome for Android does too, which is really good. And more browsers are actually adopting it. If you have an iPhone, you're going to have a hard time.
Safari.
Let's not say anymore. And also, yes, we can implement controllers, but it is more tricky. So a really good solution for this is, for example, they have it on the cardboard, is you have the gaze view. So you look into a point and you fix on that point and it counts down 3, 2, 1 and it takes you to the next place. So you don't, controllers are implemented, but for WebVR it's quite complicated. So now that I've said that browsers aren't that great and all this and that, why should we even consider WebVR? Even though it's true that some browsers do not support WebVR, it's still the best way to distribute your content to the widest possible audience. You don't have to worry about platforms, you don't have to worry about headsets. And the cool thing is we also have web audio, so we get that spatial surround sound that we need when creating a web VR experience. Also, if we're using the web, we can use all the tools that the web provides, such as PWA, and create an offline experience. And we have lots of engines that allow us to not have to deal with WebGL. So we can use babylon.js, Three.js, A-Frame, and React 360 to create the experiences that we need. We also have Blender, which allows us to create animations and 3D objects, which is a really cool tool. It's tricky if you don't have experience, but it's really cool. And last but not least, because we're going to be creating these experiences from our laptop, we need to be able to enable WebVR on our browser on our laptop, right? And we can do that with that really cool Chrome extension called WebVR API emulation, which we're going to see at the end. And it's a really cool way of debugging it too. Right, so we're going to talk about babylon.js today. And babylon.js is actually by Microsoft. It has nothing to do with that Sherry works at Microsoft, I promise. It's a really good engine. But as you do work at Microsoft, I guess it's your obligation to explain us what babylon.js is.
I accept the honor. So yeah, so I should tell the story that this talk for Anna and I was the first step to exploring the VR as well. So we started everything on our own by using this, and then I accepted the challenge to go and try to create the stuff with WebGL, and it was pretty tough. So I created a square, which was okay, and then I wanted to create a triangle to draw a house. It was not okay at all. So it was a lot of calculation, a lot of knowledge that actually I didn't have. So it was not for me. And then I started to explore all the different libraries that they were there, and which was for example, the babylon.js. So I realized that all of these libraries, they have all of these things by default. You can bring it. If you want to create a box, you just have a function. You have a method that says create box. Then it will create it for you. So they remove a lot of this complexity for people like me that I'm not an animator on the web, or I'm not a 3D person on the web. So that's why that I really like all of these libraries. And then babylon.js, what it also creates, you can use a playground, and you can, which has a lot of things already for you, and then you can explore and see it right away, that what is the result of it. And it has a lot of cool API to enable VR for you at the end as well. And the good thing is that a lot of people, they're using the playground, and then they are, for example, we mentioned Blender. Blender for me, as another person that I'm not a 3D object creator, so I cannot use Blender, to be honest. But there are a lot of things that you can bring it from Blender there, and then people do it on playground, and then you can actually borrow those elements in your own playground, and then all of a sudden you create a really cool experience. So we started using babylon.js. And then I'm going to show you our demo is pretty advanced. So since we are in Christmas, so we decided to create a gift, and then we tried to create a. Let me play it. Sorry. So then we have this box, and then we started to have the whole snow and everything, and then you can see that here, that the code is not actually, it's not pretty tough. So you just create everything, and then you just because it's TypeScript. So you do and say that I want to create this color, and then just position it here, and then all of a sudden you can create such a cool experience, and then you move around and all of those things. So let's go back to the presentation and then tell you that how we did that. In order to create a VR experience, first of all, you need to create a 3D experience. And you achieve that by going through step 1 to step 6. You have your engine, you have the scene, you have your camera and everything, and at the end, you just enable the VR. So let's start by the number 1, which is the engine. What is an engine, Anna?
Well, the engine gets everything running, right? So what we need to do is actually enable the babylon.js engine. And to do so, as it's TypeScript, I guess you're all familiar with TypeScript because Angular TypeScript. We call the class engine. We pass through canvas because we want to use the canvas, which is what Sherry was talking about earlier. And we say true because we want all of the properties that canvases provide. Otherwise, it defaults to false, and that way we don't have any of the properties, and I don't know why it's the default. But anyhow. If you are using the playground, the engine's already running, so this step is not necessary. Later on, we're showing you how we use this in Angular, so this part is very important. But let's see about step 2, Sherry, the scene.
So of course you need to have if you want to have a movie as well, you need a scene to put your object in it. So scene is basically, the concept of scene is like that. And then to do that, you just create a scene out of your engine. And one thing to remember is that once you are inside the VR experience, so it also has its own life cycle. And once you change the position, and you have to tell it that you have to render it again. And even if the people they are in browser and they resize the browser, so it also need to trigger again to be run as well, to kind of render it from it. Or when you use the teleport, you go from a scene to another scene. So that's why that this is very important we didn't know it, so we had a lot of trouble. And then we realized that the concept is like that, so you have to tell it to render it again. And how about the camera?
Okay, so you need to find a way of looking around the scene and getting around the scene, so you need the camera. And this step is very simple. We just attach it. Again, we use the canvas and true. The cool thing about babylon.js is that it has a lot of different cameras that we can use. The two most used ones are universal and arc rotate, the first two ones. Universal gives you that first-person camera, and arc rotate is like you orbit around it. So we used arc rotate because we have the gift box, which would be the target, and then you orbit around the gift box, and we did it so that you can see the gift box from different perspectives and have that kind of experience. To do so, you call the arc rotate camera, you give it a name, you give it the options, which is the positioning of the camera, and then you say scene. So in our case, we only have one scene, that's why we just call scene, but if you have more than one scene, you have to specify which scene you want to attach it to. So everything looks a bit dark right now, Sherry?
Yeah, definitely we need to lighten it up with the light. So once you have all of these scene and camera ready, then you need to add light. And then there are multiple ways of applying this light. One of them, judging by the name point light, is a light that you just point it to a specific place. And in order to create it, you of course give it a name, and then you're going to give the position of where exactly it needs to point to, and then which scene, because you might have multiple scenes. Actually, most of if it's not a small demo, you normally have multiple scenes. So you should say that, okay, this light needs to be lit up on this scene. And directional light is also that when you want to have an angle from the point that you want to lighten up. So of course, this also has a name, and then the position that the angle will start, and then which scene to lighten up. Spotlight is also, judging by the name, it's a spotlight, that it has a name, and then you just say that from where point to start, how wide it needs to be, and then where it needs to be end. So in order to do that, you use the spotlight. In our project, and then hemispheric light is that when you have a general light for a specific scene, which is, of course, it has a name, and then the position, and then the scene number. And in our project, we use the hemispheric light to lighten up the whole scene, and also we added a spotlight on top of the gift box. And if you look at it from top, you can see that it has totally lit up there. And it's so easy. So you just say that, yeah, babylon.js, I want to have a hemispheric light, and then the name, and then the factor options that you want to have. But up to here, all the phrases that we use, it was pretty familiar. But what is a mesh?
So mesh is basically the objects that we're going to put into our scene. They're normally made out of triangles, so if you're using Blender, you might already be familiar with this. But don't get too scared, because the cool thing is that babylon.js already has meshes integrated, so you can already use a ready-made mesh. And to do so, you use the mesh builder method. So you say mesh builder dot create shape, well, not create shape, but it'd be create box, create cylinder, whatever shape, the name, the options, and again, the scene, just like we saw. And there's two ways of doing it. You can use the default ones they have without adding any sort of properties. The properties would be height, width, depth, or you can customize them. But for our example, as it's a very simple box, we just used the default one, and we didn't pass any properties. We called the mesh builder, so in our case, it's create box, because we wanted a box. And then what we did was we wanted to add some wrapping paper. Otherwise, it's just a gray box. To do so, you have to use something called materials. And with materials, that's how you define either the color or the texture. And you can choose opacity here, or you can diffuse it, or you can do all sorts of things here. We just applied the texture very simply. So what we did was use a diffuse texture to the wrapping. And so it's a seamless pattern we use, very simple pattern. You can use whatever you like. You can use a built-in one. Babylon.js has quite a few textures and patterns that you can actually use. You can create your own one, or if you Google, I'm pretty sure there's like thousands out there that you can use. So up until there, we've created the box and the scene, but how do we position everything in this world?
This word, VR word, yes. So it's pretty simple. So everything in the VR world is consisting of the X, Y, and Z angle. And then we all know that X is this way, Y is that way, and then Z is the depth. And then we have a function which is called vector tree that you can pass everything there. And then you can use that for positioning the light as well, object, everything. Up to now, when we mention the position, you can use this vector tree to have the position. In our case, what we did is that once we created our gift, then we just could go and say that, okay, the gift, the position X, Y, Z, and then you pass the object. And in this way, you can also that once you are suddenly have the using the position and then the user change the position, you can based on that, you only go and change one of them. Or you can again use the vector tree and then pass the options that you want to. And a rotation is also like that. It's slightly more complex when you want to use the rotation because you rotate it, and it's generally more complex than positioning everything. But it's using the same concept. And when you look at here, is also that once you create everything, you can rotate it X, Y, and Z like that, or with a vector. And then what is this VR helper?
Okay, so up until now, we've created a 3D world, which is what Sherry was mentioning. And now we need to create that VR experience. And to do so, all we need to do is enable the VR helper. Babylon.js makes it very simple. All we need to do is introduce one line of code. So we call the create default VR experience method onto the scene. And what that does for us is it creates this tiny little icon down here. And when you click on it, it actually goes into VR mode. I would do it now, but we don't have much time, so I think we should go on to the demo.
Yes.
And but the slides will be available, so please feel free to try it all out and whatever. Okay, so now we're at an Angular conference. Let's talk about Angular. How do we introduce Babylon.js into Angular? So first of all, we have our Angular project. We do an npm install Babylon, and we save it to our project. We then have to remember that we have to continue using our component-based architecture, right? We don't want to mess everything up. So what we did is we injected our Babylon.js into our service, just so that we had the separation of concerns nicely where they're meant to be. And then we passed the logic down from the service into our GIF component, which is where we had our canvas tag, and then we could do whatever we wanted with the application outside of there. So enough for talking. Let's have a quick look at the
Let's go to the demo right away. So first of all, I want to show you before we go there. So this is our Angular project. And in what we did here, that we created this toggle outside of the whole component, which control that if it's a snow or it's not a snow. And then in this way, what we could do with that, we could also make our component customizable and then pass that what type of scene that you want to have. Here is a snow, but you can easily just pass an image of a grass. Then everything will be like a grass root or mountain or sea or everything. And everything is the same. And then we can also enable the VR mode. And then we can just go here and have this VR extension that we were just talking about. Then you can just use the transition, or you can use the rotate, and then that in this way you could just it's a bit slow. So you can just see that how it will work that as if a user has the headset on. So let me just quickly go here. So our project is pretty simple. So inside the source folder that we have a component, GIF component, and then in our HTML of that component we have our canvas. Maybe I should just make it big.
You should zoom in a bit.
Yeah. Oh, it doesn't work right now. Oh, it doesn't work right now.
Okay.
So let's just be, and we don't have time. Okay, so what we did here, I'm just going to simply tell you then what it is. So we have created our service where we injected our kind of Babylon here, and then in our service we have two methods. One is that creating the scene, and then the other one is to start the engine and then re-render the engine. And so in this way, we could just copy and paste basically anything that we had in the playground here and under this service, and then inside our component is which is just basically a normal Angular component with the input and everything. The only specific thing here that we had to do is that we need to start the engine and create the scene on ngAfter init, because everything is inside our canvas, and then we cannot start it before the canvas tag is on the browser. That's why that we need to remember to do that. So we go to the ngAfter init and we create the scene and we render it. And then the other thing is that because we wanted to make it customizable and toggle that snow start and stop, or we wanted to suddenly pass a new kind of a wrapping paper for our gift, so we needed to do inside the ng on init. After we get the new value, then we need to re-render the scene. So we have to remember that re-rendering on the ng on change as well. The code is here. We don't have definitely we don't have time to talk much about it. And we are sharing our slide, and everything is there.
And you can come speak to us.
Yeah, you can come and speak to us later on. So this was our very basic demo. And if we go back here, which for whatever reason my computer is not working right now because we're on the stage.
So I know it's time for a break. If you could just give me one more minute. So why should we even consider VR? So when you use a laptop or a mobile, you normally just see things, right? But VR, you actually immerse yourself into a whole different reality. So it's more about doing. And there are some really cool examples. So with education, just imagine that you can go to the solar system and actually see the solar system from afar instead of just looking at it in a textbook. Like, kids are really going to learn on a different level. Health, surgeons are learning how to do surgery through VR, and then they can apply that on real people. So this is really cool. And the same for the industry. Like earlier, Sherry mentioned that people learned how to fly back in the day. Nowadays, they're learning how to change the wings of an aeroplane through VR and then actually implementing it on real airplanes. So you can fly safely now. It's okay. And last but not least, we have gaming, which is, I think, the most common one that most people think about when we think about VR. But as you've seen, it's not the only one. And our question for all of you today is, let's see what you will create with VR, because we hope that this talk inspired you more than anything and to get you starting to code and see what you do. So
yeah, and we really want to hear what you are going to create, and please let us know that what you are going to create. So our slides are already up. You can just use that URL to get our slides and code and everything. And one thing is that we have a lot of resources inside our slide. And I don't know if you already know Aisha Gul, which is I really like her. And she has a GitHub page with all the possible resources of not only about the VR, but also about the mixed reality and AR as well. So I really recommend you to go through all of the slides. Most of the things that Anna and I will learn, it was through those resources. And yes, thank you very much for listening to us.
Yeah.
And thanks for all the organizer of NGBE for creating such a great experience.
And to Bonnie and
yeah,
Sam
Bonnie
for
and Sam, we love
being
you.
MCs.
Yeah.
Thank you to all of you. Thanks.